तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So in the last class, we took up the portion of Srimad Bhagavatam, which deals with the 6 questions which were asked to the Suta Goswami, Suta Ugrasravasa, who was passing through the Naimisharanya, where the Shaunaka and all other saints were performing some sacrifice. And they asked 6 questions, in a response to which the discussion on the Srimad Bhagavatam, the re-narration of the Srimad Bhagavatam ensued. So the 6 questions, what were the 6 questions? The first was, what's the purpose of life? So this was not answered at the very beginning, as we have mentioned. But to answer that, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam was again narrated. So in short, just to have a gist of this, the answer to the 6th question, what is the purpose of life? To develop love for God. So if that's the fact, that if we have to develop love for the divine, then for what purpose are all those elaborate sacrifices that has been enumerated, described in the Vedas? They are meant for. That's the second question. What's the purpose of the Vedas? The karma kandas of the Vedas. So the answer was, actually they are to please the Lord. So the answer we may find at present very simple answer, but that's what happens in our life. What happens that we resort to some rituals to show our devotion, and in the process of time, the devotion we forget. The rituals become the be-all and end-all of our existence. They turn out to be the meaningless rituals, meaningless repetition of the mantras, no heart, no love, nothing. Those elaborate rituals itself becomes the be-all and end-all of existence. We forget the purpose for which it was meant. I will just in this context relate a wonderful conversation between Rabindranath Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi. Before the independence, at the time of the Swadeshi movement, Mahatma Gandhi found that because of our cotton being exported to England, and from their textile, the cloths were coming to India at much exaggerated price. It was a part of an evil of colonialism. Our cotton we are using, it is coming at an exaggerated price, which the people cannot afford. And we find that the Swadeshi movement started with the idea, let us boycott all the British goods. Let us wear coarse clothes. Let us have our hand-woven meals at home, charka. With that, we will weave our clothes. So as a mass movement, it started, the Swadeshi movement with the charka movement. Now, Rabindranath Tagore was in very good terms with Mahatma Gandhi, but they had the difference of opinion. Rabindranath Tagore asked, do you think just by cutting, just by producing, just by having cloths through the charka, can sustain the economy of a nation, where you find that industrialization is the mainstream of the global economy, where we stand. Just by charkha, how can you sustain the economy of a nation in this global market? How can it be a practical solution to what you think is the exploitation of the British? Is it a practical solution? According to Rabindranath, actually the solution was that we ourselves has to industrialize to cope up with the textile of the West. It's not going back to the charkha. But Mahatma Gandhi replied, what you say, I do understand. But at the same time, just to develop a sense of national feeling, that people may feel that a love for the nation, for that we need some tangible practices. So charkha, you can say, has to do with that. Most probably it has nothing to do with the economy. In the long run, most probably what you say, yes, industrialization is required. But just to develop a sense of patriotism, some sorts of acts are necessary. So according to Mahatma Gandhi, it was a type of ritual. More than sustaining the economy of the nation, it was a type of ritual. And we find Rabindranath very nicely is telling what he's saying in response, that within a few days, people will forget the purpose for which they are using the charkha. They will forget that. It will become just a ritual like something at each and every household. I don't think with that the real patriotism will grow. So this was the opinion of Rabindranath Tagore. And when this conversation is happening, when Swami Vivekananda has returned from the West, and wherever he's going, passing from his famous lectures from the Colombo to this Almora, throughout India, from the Sri Lanka, he started to the Himalayas. Wherever he's going, there was a huge tsunami, regeneration. The people got a real interest in reviving the national values, the national ethos, the national culture. They thought that the Indian culture is merely superstition. Swami Vivekananda brought back the faith. And we found a huge tsunami, a huge upheaval in the entire nation. Wherever he's going, masses are following him. And Rabindranath saw that. And then very nicely he's commenting, comparing the Gandhi's philosophy of much later. That much later, of course, this Gandhi's philosophy of charkha, he compared with that when he saw Swami Vivekananda coming back from the West. He saw it earlier. And later he saw this Mahatma Gandhi. And what nicely is commenting, that if Mahatma Gandhi has motivated the finger of the nation, Swami Vivekananda has motivated the heart. So why we are just trying this instance, that rituals, however with good intention we may start, at last sometimes we find it becomes something meaningless. We forget the passion behind it, the love, the patriotism, everything we forget. The national flag, just on the Independence Day to hoist the national flag becomes a ritual. We forget how much sacrifice was there behind it. So in every field, we will find that the rituals, elaborate rituals, at last makes us forget the purpose of it. There's a famous song of Rabindranath Tagore, Tomar pujar chhole tomaye bhule thaki. Means in the pretext of worshipping you, we forget you. That behind there's dhuper dhoar pichhore tomaye paine tomar charan choa. ফুলের মালা দীপের আলো ধূপের ধোয়ার পিছন হতে পাইনে তোমার চরণ ছোঁয়া. That all those elaborate rituals where you are using the incense, the smoke of the incense as it creates a barricade between you and the divine. The flowers, the heap of flowers is as if creating this barricade between the you and the divine. You forgot the purpose. So that's the thing we find, that when the first question was if love of God is the purpose, then why all these elaborate rituals? This question is asked because people have forgot that actually the rituals are meant to please the divine. The rituals has become the be-all and end-all of all the spiritual practices. Instead of developing love for God, they are a means to go to Swarga, to have the same type of life in the afterworld. So the purpose they have forgot. That's why we will find in the script, the Bhagavatam, they are indicating, after all these rituals, elaborate rituals, are meant to please the Lord. It is for Him to, as an offering, we are performing those all sacrifices. So the next question, if that be so, then yes, we have to remind the people that yes, the rituals has to be done with the original idea of pleasing the divine, as an offering to the divine. Don't forget that. And resort to the Vedas. And what's the purpose of the Lord's advent? That was the third question. That if that be so, if the love of God is there, and the rituals, elaborate rituals, are meant for loving the God through some tangible way, what's the need for the Lord's advent? Why does He incarnate again and again? And then we will find throughout the Bhagavatam, the answer is given why it's required. That all those elaborate rituals almost becomes meaningless in the present age. We cannot just think of performing them because of our busy schedule. From morning to evening, we find ourselves totally engaged in our livelihood. Just to earn our livelihood, we are so busy. There is no time, and then we are short-lived. The lifespan is something which won't allow us to go for those intricate, elaborate rituals. So the Lord incarnates so that by holding onto His way of life, we can rise up. What the Leela means, to give an example, we will just relate to one of the Swami Vivekananda's famous statement. When Swami Vivekananda was back from the West to India, and he has already established Belur Math, and the brahmacharis were all joining. And then one of the brahmacharis one day asked Swami Vivekananda, the Swamiji, that your lectures are wonderful. It's highly inspirational. But in our day-to-day life, what to do? That please give us a framework following which we can progress in spiritual life. We need some framework. Swami Vivekananda, very interestingly, he told, in Bengali, the sentence I will say, then I will translate, Ja korar tar dher beshi korechi, tora shudu dege ja. Means in this life, what has to be done? I have done profusely more than that. More than that. In just this short span of life, what has to be done? I have done more than that. I have done enough. What you have to do, it is dege jawa. This word dege jawa is very interesting. In Hindi, in Bengali, in the original Indian languages, dag means to just make some mark. In Bengali, in the olden days, this word dege jawa was there, which is not used nowadays. What it means, that how a child learns to write. It's a very interesting way. How? The mother, the father, or the teacher will write the alphabets. Maybe in the paper or in a slate, they will write, and they will hold the child's hand along with the pen, along with the pencil, and they will assist the child to mark over, to just scribble over the alphabet which they have written. We all have learned writing that way, by scribbling over already written alphabets by our parents. We have learned writing. The already written alphabets by our parents or by teachers, we have scribbled over them, and we have learned writing. So that's what Swamiji is saying. In this page of life, what has to be written? We have written enough of it by our own life. What you have to do is just go on scribbling over that, our life. You will find your life has been transformed. So that's the meaning of Leela. He comes down so that we get something to scribble upon, so that by scribbling upon that, we rise up. Shankaracharya very nicely have described sadhana. What is sadhana? For a realized soul, the spontaneous way of living. It's not that they plan to live in a certain way. Very spontaneously, the way they live. When we try to imitate that, that becomes sadhana for us. Something is very spontaneous for them. The detachment, the renunciation, the discrimination, the love for God, all those are spontaneous. When seeing them, we try to imitate that, that becomes sadhana. For us, that becomes a practice. For them, that is not a practice, that is spontaneous. So the avatar comes for Leela this Kevalam, just to do it in a very spontaneous, very playful manner. It enters in the life of Ramakrishna. We find very interesting one incident. We will say, how playfully did he do it? Hajra Mahashaya, he was of the idea that one has to do a very intense, severe sadhana, and he wanted to show it to others. So when the devotees used to come, he will sit in the portico of the Ramakrishna's room, just outside, and he will constantly go on just repeating the name of the Lord with a rosary. With the rosary in his hand, he used to go on doing japa. One day, Sri Ramakrishna came to him and just told, see, that I cannot somehow rotate this rosary. I cannot use this rosary. And Hajra never understood why one cannot use the rosary. Then Ramakrishna took the rosary from Hajra and told, let me try. He took it in his left hand and he just turned it by one bead. There are 108 beads in that rosary. He turned in one bead and his hand stopped. He was totally motionless. He went into deep samadhi. So this speaks of the spontaneity, that we are trying to concentrate our mind bead by bead by keeping the mind in that, repeating the name and in the count. And for him, he cannot do that. Why he cannot do that? Because his mind spontaneously goes to that state of samadhi. Just one bead he turned. That also in left hand. He knew very well. If he takes it in right hand and try to do it, he cannot do it. So he took it in left hand, that yes, that's not the hand in which I am not habituated. And he goes into deep samadhi. So that's the habitual state. There's a habitual state for an avatar. When we try to do it, it becomes sadhana. So they come down, they live a life which with spontaneity in a playful way. That's the Leela. That's why we call it Leela. Leela means some sport. It's not something very serious for them, but for us to just to scribble over that life becomes sadhana. So when the purpose was told that they come, that so that holding unto their Leela, we can rise up. So naturally, the next two questions that follows, that what was his Leela as Krishna? He came as Krishna. He came as other avatars. That was the fifth question. What was his sport, divine sport, holding unto which, scribbling over which we can rise up? So that's, please relate to us, so that hearing that, we can inculcate them, we can internalize them, we can try to internalize them in our life. Please relate that. So that's the fourth and the fifth question. And the last question was, yes, God do incarnate. He comes, he plays with his devotees, a wonderful Leela he enacts in this life. They're really fortunate who comes in association with them when he's living. But he, after some time, as even the Lord, when he is enacting as a human being, he has to enact exactly like a human being. So for him also, like birth, death is there as far as this physical plane of existence is concerned. There is antardhana, the Leela ceases after some time. This huge merriment we find in the Bible, very nicely, that Jesus is saying that as long as I am there, it's a party. Enjoy the party. When I am gone, it's gone. So when he is gone, holding on to which, holding on to what the religion can thrive. When he is there, the entire creation is as if, what you say, is throbbing with spirituality. He brings a new movement to the world. But when he's gone, holding on to which, holding on to what, the religion will survive. Yes, that's the sixth question. And there the answer will be, which the Bhagavatam will give, is the scripture itself. His Leela, which has been which is encoded in the scripture. What he has played, that in the form of words has been as if encoded in the scripture. By reading them, we have to decode it through our life. Unless the Lord comes down and plays the Leela, the scripture sometimes has no meaning. If you don't have as a reference any great life, just read the scripture, we will make a mess out of it. We will just have a lot of misunderstanding. There will be a gap of understanding. In the words of Swami Vivekananda, in our attempt to make the image of Shiva, we will make the image of a monkey. Shiv Korte Banor Gora. It is only these lives, when we take as a referral point and then read the scriptures reveals. We understand the meaning. You just take out those lives and try to read the scriptures, we will find we are confusing. We cannot understand the meaning. So these lives are there, the Leela, and when they are not there, the scriptures are there. So with the help of the scriptures, we have to relate to those lives. And that's what can sustain us. So that's the wonderful thing for any religion, for any scripture. This is the 6 questions, such a nice question which has been asked, which we find as an introduction to the Bhagavatam. For what is true for any other scripture is true for this Bhagavatam also. It is a scripture holding on to which it is not that where if you just read some abstract philosophy, you can ever really relate to it. You will be confusing. That's why the life is required. So as Sri Ramakrishna used to one day asked Naren that what is the use of scriptures? It is just like an almanac. When almanac was lying there, he asked Naren, bring that almanac, read what's the forecast. Yes, this year there is going to be torrential rain in the rainy season. Is it going to be torrential rain? So it is written there. Squeeze that almanac. So Naren was surprised why he's asking. And then Ramakrishna is saying, why? Do you think a single drop of water will come out if you squeeze the book? Not a single drop of water. As long as you don't get a drop of water, it is just a mere book, nothing else. It mentions about profuse rain, but it's just a book. So scriptures are just mere dry books unless it has been enlivened by the life of an avatar. So that's the thing which is encoded there. We have to go through them and try to relate the principles, the philosophy of mentioned in the scriptures with those life to find the meaning and then inculcate in our life. That's what Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana means. I hear, I manana, I cogitate whatever is this philosophy with those lives. And once I understand, then the process of internalization is Nididhyasana, the practice. That's the Dege Java, that's the scribbling over those life. And that's what is being is answered in the 6th question. There's the scriptures. So after saying this, now we find the importance of the scriptures like Shrimad Bhagavatam. That these are the books where all those divine Leela has been enacted. Not only the divine Leela has been mentioned, at each and every step we find, along with the divine Leela, the speaking of the principles, speaking of the philosophy which has been spoken in the Vedas, and they're relating to it. And that's how the scripture becomes meaningful. So with this, we find that the entire Bhagavatam, the introduction of the Bhagavatam is actually because of the inspiration of the sage Narada. It is Narada who came when Vyasa was perplexed, that after dividing the Vedas into 4 parts, writing 18 Puranas, composing the Mahabharata, he has even composed the Brahma Sutras, and he found still he couldn't motivate the people to the spiritual life after such a stupendous job. He was perplexed. He knew not what to do. It's then when Narada comes to give a prescription with a suggestion that why not describe the life of Krishna, which you have seen. It was enacted in your presence. That's the thing which will be something and liberating for the humankind. So we find that actually it is the Narada Rishi Narada, who is the source, who is the inspiration of this scripture. So his life is very interesting. That has been enunciated in the in Shrimad Bhagavatam, in the 5th and the 6th chapter of the first part of the first book of Bhagavatam. So we will today just try to highlight the life of Narada, that wonderful life, that how an ordinary boy, an orphan, he's an orphan, not of a very high caste. He is the son of a maid servant. Just see the scripture. Sri Ramakrishna used to say a wonderful thing. Ek upaye jati protha uthe jete pare. There's only one way by which you can get rid of all the distinctions, the caste distinctions. What's that? Bhakti. Once you are a bhakta, you have transcended all the caste. Bhaktir kono jat nahi. The simple words of Ramakrishna we find is exemplified in the life of Narada. He is the son of a maid servant of Shudra class. And his mother was a widow. And she used to just to do some menial jobs in some ashrama where the sadhu stayed, like cleaning the vessels, cleaning the ashram, that's the work. And that's how, as a young boy, as a small boy, Narada, along with his mother, used to go to the ashrama, and that's how he came in association with the monks. So in the 23rd sloka of the 5th chapter of the first part of Bhagavatam, this is indicated. Ahang Pura. And this happened not in this cycle. In the previous cycle of creation, it's happened. Not in this cycle. Narada is the one who is like a Nitya Siddha. Sri Ramakrishna says that he is ever perfect. Once he has reached the perfection, nothing can delude him. Cycles after cycle, they are there for the benefit of the humankind. They never forget their real nature. They never forget their devotion. They come back again in the next cycle to help the humankind. We may say, where is Narada? Yes, they are there in all the so-called the mental world. When we meditate, if you know for certain that sometimes we feel that just by repeating the mantra, very quickly I am developing devotion. Know it for certain, it is the mental vibrations which they have created, which is helping us. To give a common example, suppose you are not in a good mood and you somehow feel that you try to meditate, nothing is happening, you somehow cannot come out of that slumber, of that depressed the mental state. And then someone tells, okay, let us go to some temple. And even unwillingly, most probably someone told you, accompany him, go to the temple, just sit there for a while, and suddenly you find your mind have changed. What has happened? That in the temple, when all the people go there, they go with that motivation. That's the place. For some time we will forget the world, we will try to contemplate on the divine. And we create a mental vibration there, the spiritual vibration. In Bhagavatam, in one place it is mentioned how the tirthas are formed. Tirthi kurvanti sadhava. It is not formed automatically. It has not been formed in heaven and thrown on earth. It is we, the ordinary humans, who have made that place holy by going there and thinking good thoughts for ages together. And that's how a wonderful vibration has been created. And we get the benefit out of it. When you are not in a good mood, you just go and you find your mind has changed. Suddenly you find that you can relate to that sublime vibrations there. Similarly, this Narada Muni and all, you may say, yes, they are not physically present. They are there in the Shukshma Sharira to have with all these thought waves, with the help of mantras. When you can relate to that thought wave, immediately there is a tremendous force acting on you to help you to uplift mentally and progress in spiritual life in a very high, in a very fast and accelerated pace. So this is this Narada in the previous cycle. When he was a small boy, he used to go with his mother to serve all those sages, the monks, the recluses. That's being mentioned. Ahang pura atita bhave. Atita Bhava means in the last millennium. Formerly, in the Pura means formerly, in the last millennium, Abhavang Mumane. I was born, Abhavang, I was born as a son of Dasyaha Astu Kasyachana, Vedavadinam, Nirupita Balaka Eva Yoginam, Shushrushane, Pravrishi, Nirvi Vikshatam. So, what is this? Oh Muni. Actually, Narada is describing his life to Vyasa, that how he has developed devotion, that he's narrating, that has been again, what you say, that has been again written in the scripture Bhagavatam, of Shrimad Bhagavatam, that O Muni, O Narada Muni, formerly the Pura, in the last millennium, Atita Bhave, I was born, Abhavang, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant. This Kasyachit Kashyachana Dasaha. Dasaha Astu Kasyachana. I was the son of a maidservant who was engaged in the service of the Brahmanas, who were following the principles of the Vedanta, of the Vedavadina, of Vedanta. I was just serving them. And then when they were living together, they were all living in one place, in ashrama, Nirvivikshatam. They were all living there. When they were living, generally they were the mendicants, just to move around. But even now the tradition is there for 4 months during the rainy season. During the rainy season, in the 4 months, they stay in one place, because that's the time when the land becomes infested with snakes and all those poisonous insects, with venomous insects and snakes. And weather, of course, is not favorable to move around. So they stay in one place, the Chaturmashya. That's mentioned as the Pravrishi here in this word. So during those 4 months, when they were staying there, my mother, for the purpose of Sustrushane, she used to visit there. She was a maidservant, and I used to accompany her. And then what's the next sloka? What is saying? Te mai apeta akhila chapale arbhake dante adhrita kriranake anuvartini chakru kripang yadyapi tulya darshana susrumane munayo alpabhashini. So that he, though as a small boy, he had some very, very good, sublime qualities, very good qualities he had. So that qualities enabled him to get the grace of those sages, the blessings of those sages. How? So though they are impartial by nature, yadyapi tulya darshana, they are all impartial by nature, those followers of those Vedanta, those Munayo, but they blessed him, the small boy, because of that's the humility of Narada. There was no reason, causeless mercy. Those chakru kripang, by causeless mercy they have, without unconditional mercy, they blessed me. And as far he is concerned, as far I was concerned, that's Narada is saying, he also, of course, had some qualifications to be showered by those grace. What's those? Those qualifications, these are the thing how scripture has to be related. It is telling the story, but more important than the story is now these qualifications, which we should never forget, which should be in our mind, and we have to internalize, inculcate. Those are the way we can scribble. If we just take it as a story, but after reading just like a novel, we forget it. But it's not a story. Through the story, now it will speak, he himself will be speaking of those qualities which enabled him to get the blessings, the grace, unconditional grace of the sages. What are those? Danta. He was self-controlled. He had the nature of this delaying the gratification. He was not after the senses. He was self-controlled. Danta. He was not like other children, too much attached to sports. Adhrita kriranake. By nature, he was calm and composed, not always running around, playing with other children, all the sorts of sports generally we find with the children. he somehow from the childhood, because of his good sanskara, had that calm and composed nature, had no attachment for excessive sports, adhrita kriranake. And even though he was a boy, it's that even though he was a boy, arbhaka is the boy, even though he was a boy, it's quite obvious that they should be restless. But no, he never had too much attachment for sports, and he was not restless. Apeta akhila chapale. He was not restless. And so just see that what are the qualities which has been mentioned? Self-control, calm, poised, and the last thing which is mentioned in this sloka is alpa bhashini, not talkative, not throughout the day just gossiping. Thus, by talking, our mind gets very easily distracted. In the medieval ages, in the Christian monastery, this silence was one of the requisites, that without any purpose, no talk should be there. Even in all other religious traditions, we find the silence has been given a tremendous importance. Because unless we stop talking, we will never know that we are constantly talking in our mind. The only difference between a mad person and the so-called normal person is whatever talk is going on in the mind, the mad person speaks it out. And that's why we say he's mad. If we speak out what we are thinking constantly, we will be declared as mad. There is no congruence in the thoughts, what sorts of nonsense is going on. And we cannot know it unless we stop this external talk. We stop this external talk, then you have to stop the talk which is going on in your mind. That's the real, what you say, that alpa bhasha. When I can stop the talk which is going on in my mind. That is the real practice of mauna. And for that, first, this too much of speaking has to stop. With that, we can never control our mind. So just see, in the form of story, he's mentioning the qualities. And then, not only that, the next sloka speaks something that one of the qualities of developing devotion, that how that the vibes, the vibrations, the good vibrations, being in association with a spiritually illumined soul helps us. All the association helps us. What? Uchishtalepa, anumodita dvijay. That he's a poor boy. So as food, he had no proper sustenance. He has no proper means of sustenance. The sages, after taking the food, the boy asks them, can I take the remnants of what you have? And they permitted. Anumodita, Dvijay. The Dvijas, the one who had second birth. So spirituality is the second birth. They're the Dvija. Dvija means twice born. First, we are born as a biological being, and then we get the initiation in the spiritual life. That's our second birth. So here, all the sages were that Dvija. They had that second birth. They were all born in the realm of spirituality. So this Dvija, they permitted. Yes, after taking the food, whatever is remaining, Uchishta Lepan, he was allowed to take that. Swakritsma bhunje tat apasta kilvisha evam pravrittasya vishuddha chetasa tat dharma evatma ruchi prajayate. So once only, and that he was permitted. I took the remnants of the food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. So that's the importance of prasada. The word prasada means, actually what prasada means? Prashanti, calmness. The thing which is offered to the divine, to the sages, that is called prasada, because taking that, just by that physical thing, you find prashanti in your mind. Apart from the tanmatras, apart from the vibrations related to that food, the idea itself is also very important. When you're taking that food, what's the idea? It is the food which is the holy person has taken. This thought itself sanctifies your mind, Sanctifies the food, sanctifies the mind. You, along with the food, you're taking physically the food, but in your mind, you're thinking of that holy soul and all the things which has made him holy. So that's how it purifies the mind. You again it's the law of association. It's just simply the law of association by which your mind is getting purified. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart. And that time, the very nature of this, all this, the very nature of my very nature of these sages became attractive to me. I started feeling attraction towards them. Through the food, I developed an attraction towards them. And then what he's saying? Tatra anu aham Krishna katha pragayatam anugrahena Ashrinavam Manohara Ta Sraddhaya Me Anupadam Vishrinvata Priyasravasi Anga Mama Abhavat Ruchihi. So in that association and with the mercy of those Vedantis, Tatra Anu Aham Krishna Katha Pragayata. As they allowed me, I could sit and hear about the divine glories, the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, Krishna Katha Pragayata. And thus listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of the Godhead increased. This anugrahena, when they allowed me to hear and I was hearing attentively, ta sraddhaya me anupadam visrinvata. My faith, my devotion developed for it. Priyasvasi angamama. And just by listening to that attentively, that I started developing faith, it became something more dear to me, and it purified me. I developed ruchi. I developed some taste for the divine, for hearing those divine glories. Just see all the qualities which we have to imbibe in the form of stories being mentioned. That just we started with that danta, and then calmness, self-control, calmness, and then silence, alpa bhasha, and then trying to relate to the divine personality, sadhu sangha, not only means in all the levels, physically by serving them, by having the prasada, there's the food which they have taken, by partaking that, by hearing all the divine talks which they're speaking, you're internalizing all the spiritual values. So that's the thing. See, all the qualities in the form of the stories is being mentioned. That makes the scripture so attractive. In that association, so then what is being spoken of, the next sloka, Tasmin tada labdha ruche mahamate priyasravasi askhilata askhalita mati mama yaya aham etat sat asat swamayaya pashye mai brahmani kalpitam pare. It's very nice look. So as soon as I got the taste of the personality of the Godhead, so by hearing, you get the taste for it. Tasmin tada labdha ruche. Labdha ruche. I got the taste. Labdha means to attain. Ruche means the taste. I attained the taste for all those divinely talks spoken by all those rishis. What happened to me then? My attention to hear for the Lord became unflinching. I just like to hear it more and more. This Priyasravasi, Akhilata, Matimama, constantly to hear about it, that unflinching liking for the divine words, just something became more and more in me. So that's how the love is increasing for the divine talk. And that creates a flow, that wonderful flow. Your mind becomes contemplative. So then what happens? As my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings. That gradually, by hearing, you understand this. You just try to relate to the words of the scripture, and what you understand, that actually I'm the divine being. My relationship with the Lord is eternal. The Lord is divine. I am also divine. as I have taken the covering of this body, the gross body, this physical body, the subtle body, the mind, this mind and this psychophysical existence with a sense of limitation, as I have taken this, I forgot my eternal relationship with the divine. But hearing that, it gradually dawned in my mind that after all, I'm in eternal association with the divine. And this, my attachment to this coverings, with my body, with my mind, started attenuating, falling off. So that's how what's happening. This does during these 2 seasons. The rainy season consists of the this 2 months of rainy season, followed by the 2 months of the autumn. So this rainy and the autumn, but this Sharat and Pravrishiko. The rainy is the Pravrishiko and Sharat is the rainy season. Ithang Sharat Pravrishiko Ritu Hare. For these 4 months constantly, I had the opportunity to hear these divine talks. Vishrinvato me anusavam yasho amalam. So I was allowed to hear the untainted, unadulterated glories of the Lord. When you're speaking of the Lord, there is no chance of a single worldly thought to enter. If you read the gospel, you will find that wonderful thing. As Ramakrishna was always absorbed in the divine, there are days where for 14 hours, 15 hours, Ramakrishna is interacting with the devotees. People are coming, especially on the weekends. The marvelous thing is not a single worldly talk. If you read the gospel, not a single worldly talk that how are you, how is your grandson, when your son is going to be married, nothing of that sort. It is just talking of God and God alone. And when you're talking of God, there cannot be a single thing which is adulterated, which is impure. So that's what meaning of the word amalam yasho, unadulterated glories of the Lord, that he was hearing constantly. Sankirtyamanam munibhir mahatmabhir bhakti pravrittatma rajastama apaha. So as by hearing this, as this flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of Raja and Tama, my passions, my ignorance, they started falling off. So just see how through his life he's relating. And then Jnanam Guhyatamam Yat Yat Sakshat Bhagavat Uditam Anvavochan Gamishyanta Kripaya Dina Vatsala. So as they were living after 4 months, these Vedantins who were very kind to this such a poor self-hearted soul, they instructed me. That was most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of the Godhead himself. Means the God incarnated through his life. He just have shown the path which was followed by these saints, and these saints related all those glories of the Lord. So that's what, and they did it out of mercy, without any mercenary gain. I was a poor fellow. I have nothing to give. It was just with that sense of unconditional mercy. They gave me that wonderful knowledge. And that, what happened? That whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the meeting, for the satisfaction of the Lord, for his mission, that is Bhakti Yoga. So this loving service to the Lord is what is called this Bhakti. And the Jnana is just a helping factor to it. So yadatra kriyate karma bhagavat paritoshanam jnanam yatyat adhinam hi bhakti yoga samanvitam. You know first with your intellect the purpose of the divine advent, and there the work of the intellect stops. It is just the external apartment. It is just the exterior of the Lord's mansion. If you have to go to the interior apartments, it is only through the bhakti. So that first you just know the purpose of the advent of the divine, and once you know it, as Sri Ramakrishna very nicely is mentioning to so many of his devotees, that you won't have to do much. once you know who I am, and once you know who you are, and what's the relation between you and me, your work is done. So that's the jnana. Once then naturally a tremendous love, devotion will develop, and you won't have to do anything willfully. Then the rest of the spiritual practice will just will happen through spontaneity. Once you know who you are, once you know who I am, what's the relation between you and me? So once that jnana is there, the bhakti is then follows. And that's the bhakti which will take you to the ultimate goal. So whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the Lord, that's alone is bhakti. And all the knowledge which enables you to know of the mission of the Lord. So that's just the helping factor. So these rishis helped him to have the awareness of the divine, and which subsequently followed by the love, tremendous love for the divine. So this next sloka is something very, very important. Iti murtim abhidhanena mantra murtim amurtikam yajate yajna purusham sa samyak darshana puman. So one who worships abhidhanena, actually the ultimate reality is formless, amurtikam. The yajna purusha, the ultimate Godhead, is the formless. So then what's this form means? Well, it's the path, it's the procedure which takes me ultimately to that transcendental, formless aspect of the divine. So mantra murtim amurtikam. How to reach the formless? Through murti, through mantra. So these wonderful words. Mantra murtim amurtikam. So this is how the rishis instructed him, gave him a mantra, spoke about the divine incarnation and his form. Why in spiritual life, many may say that this idolatry has no place in spirituality. The moment we say that, we do a big mistake. If you somehow meditate on a form and take the help of a mantra, your spiritual journey becomes very smooth. You know why? Swami Vivekananda in one place is describing the science behind this mantra murti, which leads you to amurti. Forget about the ultimate reality. Just take my mind at present. Let us start where I am. I find my mind has countless thoughts. But what's the thought? If you just try to find out the nature of each and every thought, each and every thought has two components. When I'm thinking, suppose I'm thinking about you, thinking about a person, what happens? The moment I think of Mr. A, first in my mind, I will be visualizing his form. Automatically it comes. And his name, I will have to just think about him. His name I have to repeat. So the thought has two components. Whenever I'm thinking, I'm talking and I am visualizing. These are the two things constantly happening. Your each and every, when the thought is linked with these two components, one is the language, and another is the visualization. Constantly it is happening. So when I try thinking that the Lord is formless and try to meditate, maybe you're resorting to some mantra, but not some form. What happens, you will find sometimes that the mind is repeating the mantra, but it is visualizing so many things. Why it has happened? Because you have taken care of only one aspect of the thought, that the language aspect, yes, by the mantra you most probably have taken care of, but the visualization aspect is free. So the chance of getting distracted is more when I am not trying to visualize something. So that's why in our tradition, this wonderful tradition, that they give there's a bhakti, in the bhakti tradition, they speak of the form of the divine, the form in which is encoded his entire life. Just thinking of that, you think of the entire life, the wonderful spiritual life. And that helps you to keep the visualization factor of your thought engaged. And the mantra keeps the language aspect of the thought engaged. And now the chances of distraction gets reduced. And when you can really meditate by keeping this visualization fixed, as well as the name, the language part of it, and the fixed to one thought, with the practice, when you can go to the flow. We have discussed in other classes also, when you go to the flow, what happens? Other thought starts falling off. The mind, the more it gets engrossed in this one thought, the form and the name, other things are falling off from your mind. And when your mind becomes more intensely absorbed, because you have developed love for it, the more you develop love, the meditation becomes spontaneous. Just the way the mother never has to meditate on the child. The love makes him think of the child automatically. So when you develop that love by constant thinking, that love develops. And once that develops, the meditation becomes more. And you will find what is happening. Even the bodily feeling starts falling off. Your hunger, thirst. And at last, a little portion of your mind, which is always engaged to keep your ego intact, that also falls off. You become one with the object of meditation. That's the samadhi. When there's no sense that I am meditating. The ego has been taken away. Your mind is totally focused. You become identified with the object of meditation. And that's the time a wonderful thing happens. The moment you reach there, you get identified with the object of meditation. You are actually going beyond the mind, beyond the ego. And suddenly that takes you to that realization of that formless aspect of the divine. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, all the divine forms are a hole in the wall of ignorance or ego. By meditating, with the help of that form and the name, you are as if chiseling a hole in the wall of ego. And when the chiseling is complete, when the hole is complete, you're peeping through it, you see infinity, infinite expanse, formless. So this form becomes the framework through which you peep into the infinity. So now you can relate. This is wonderful. So if we read these mantras, not just the story, that's why all the slokas are important, because these words, you go into the words and try to understand, then you find what a wonderful thing has been spoken of there. When you read it just as a story, forgetting the mantras, then it becomes a story. Forget this small intricate, the suggestions which has been given in the scripture. We miss it. So just see, mantra murtim amurtikam, iti murtim abhidhanena. With the help of this murti, with the help of this mantra, it takes me to the amurti. Yajate yagya purusham. The one who can do that, sa samyak darshana puman. He is the one, by going to that realization, he becomes the actual seer. Samyak darshana. There is no more imagination. As long as the chiseling process is going on, it is pure imagination. You may have a vivid visualization, still it's an imagination. But when the chiseling is complete, the ego has fallen off. You have created a hole in the wall of ego. Now you have the real vision, the actual vision that it has taken you beyond the mind. So that is the Samyak Darshana. Now nothing can delude you. Before that, everything is a belief. Maybe you are having a very high visualization, but still it's a visualization. It's not realization. But this visualization will take you to the realization. Today's imagination is tomorrow's realization. Today's visualization. And that's how we find just Narada, by relating that how he came in association with the sages. And when they left, they gave him, he was hearing for the 4 months the life of Krishna. You will find at the time of initiation, if you go for initiation, in our order especially, first they say, read the life of Ramakrishna. Then, sir, I want some mantra. No, it's not that easy. First go through the life, read the gospel. Why? That's that 4 months. After going that, now you develop the love for that form. When you think of that form, think of that name, behind that, what the spiritual treasure is, that's there. That has been encoded in this. Now you are prepared for. Now the mantra and the murti, these become important. And that's what after the 4 months that was given to them before they left. And that's the grace has been given. And now we will find this young boy. He got the mantra. He got the divine mantra. He got the form to meditate upon. And that form, which is encoded the life of his Ishta. But the only hindrance now is the mother. So now the next portion we will take up. I actually had a thought, I will today end up the class. I had a thought that we will actually take up the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna for the three Tuesdays of first 3 Tuesdays of every month. And the last Tuesday, we will keep it for the Shrimad Bhagavatam. But as we are just in the midway today, so I will continue with the Bhagavatam again in the next class. And after that, every month, we will have the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna for the first 3 weeks, and the Bhagavatam, the storytelling, in the last week. And if some portion remains, we will take up again in the next week. So these two will go hand in hand. So we today, because you will find that to relate to the Bhagavatam, how that the Gospel also will help us a lot. And the Gospel is something very, very contemporary. It will become more easy to relate to those words when we just try to reflect on it. Some wonderful meanings will come out. It can be quite interesting. So we will take up the Gospel, but in the next class, we will continue with Srimad Bhagavatam just to complete the narration of about the life of Narada, that how his spiritual practice after the sages left him, how it culminated, how it led to the realization, and how he became a Nitya Siddha to continue that for the cycles of creation together, just to help out the humankind out of ignorance. So it's a wonderful inspirational story which has been related in the Bhagavatam. We will continue again in the next class. And just to let you know that we will, on Tuesday, take up the Gospel, and the last week will be allotted to the study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But whenever we find that there's some portion is remaining, we will, of course, follow it up in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.